Hello friends and welcome to my channel. In this video we're going to explore how you can use GenAI tools for more than just passively receiving information. I'll show you how you can engage in deeper learning by engaging in a GenAI Socratic learning process based on question-driven dialogue that can help you to reflect deeply on your understanding, explore multiple perspectives, justify your choices, and build well-reasoned arguments. And you can do this by using just one prompt to begin the Socratic learning process. So, whether you're an educator like me, a student, or someone who wants to engage in deep learning using GenAI, watch and learn from the techniques that I've used in my teaching and learning approaches to enable richer learning. Before we jump in, just a quick heads up. In this video I'm going to use Copilot, but the techniques I demonstrate can be used with other tools such as ChatGPT, Google Gemini and so on. So whatever tool you use, please follow these steps as I outlined them in this video. The context for this video is that in one of my modules I asked students to use Copilot to prepare a 5-minute video presentation on relationship-based practice in social work based on 2 foundational research articles. Now, even though I'm focusing on this subject, the prompts and techniques that I demonstrate can be adapted to any subject that you want to explore. Now, it's important that the students read these articles because GenAI prompts can sometimes be inaccurate, so it's critically important that they're able to spot any inaccuracies or inconsistencies. After reading the articles, the students must prepare their 5-minute video assessment, in which I ask them to identify what they believe are the 3 most important lessons for building effective relationship practice and explain why. But rather than using Copilot to simply generate answers, I want them to think deeply about the reasoning behind their choices. And let me demonstrate the technique I've developed to enable them to do this. Before the students go on Copilot, I've created a sheet with the first prompt, and this is probably the most important one, and I'll explain shortly why. I'll share this prompt with the students and then advise them in their own time to engage in a Socratic process with Copilot. This is Copilot. I've put a link in the information section below to another video that shows you how you can access Copilot if you don't know how to get to this page. First, I'll ask students to click on the Start a New Chat button to clear Copilot's memory. Then the students will enter the prompt that I've provided. Let's break this down as we go through it. First, I ask Copilot to act as a Socratic tutor. What I'm doing is giving Copilot a role assignment. By acting as a Socratic tutor, Copilot should guide the user through reflective questioning rather than direct instruction. Secondly, the prompt explains, I am preparing to answer the assessment question. Identify what I believe are the 3 most important lessons for building effective relationship-based practice, grounded in the findings of the 2 articles below, and explain why. Here we're getting Copilot to focus on the assessment, and we're clear that the user is preparing to answer the question, and this implies the user has access to the 2 specific articles and must draw insights from them. Then the prompt provides some guidance. It clearly states that Copilot should ask open-ended questions to encourage reflection, challenge assumptions, help the user justify their choices. And the advantage of this is that it aligns with the Socratic method, which promotes critical thinking through dialogue. And finally, there's an instruction that says, ask me 1 question at a time. This is the interaction style, and this should foster a paced and thoughtful exchange. Finally, I also provide details of the 2 articles which are open access, along with their DOIs. When designing your own prompts, make sure to think carefully about its construction and make sure you test it out first and amend it as necessary. Once I hit return, Copilot responds by saying, Great, Tarsem, I love that it's personalizing this to me. Let's begin your reflective journey into identifying the 3 most important lessons for building effective relationship-based practice, grounded in the 2 Ferguson et al. 2020 articles. Here's your first open-ended question. When you think about the challenges and emotional dynamics described in long-term work with involuntary service users, what do you believe is the most essential quality or approach a practitioner must embody to sustain a meaningful relationship? And why? It tells me that I can take my time to reflect and that will build from my responses. So I'm going to answer in my own way. Rather than provide one most essential quality or approach, I'm going to answer in this way to see what the response is. So I'll type in, I believe trust, honesty and professionalism are the most essential qualities, and an empathetic approach can help sustain meaningful relationships. And Copilot responds in the following way. That's a thoughtful starting point, Sam. Trust, honesty, professionalism and empathy are indeed foundational. Let's deepen your reflection by connecting these qualities to the research. So you can see it doesn't object to my response and is encouraging and seeks to connect my response to the research. It does so by saying, in the holding relationship article, Ferguson et al. 2020, describe how practitioners create a sense of emotional containment and safety over time. Now here I want to point out that both the articles are published in 2020, so it's good that it identifies the article that it's talking about by referring to it as the holding relationship paper. Then it follows with another question, which is, how do you see the concept of holding aligning with or challenging your view of trust and empathy in practice, especially when working with service users who may initially resist or reject relational efforts? It goes on to say, let's explore how your values interact with the complexities described in the research. Now, what I like is that it's telling me that we're going to explore values and complexities. To me, it also seems to be encouraging me to engage in critical thinking. Now, having read the articles and helped to write them, I know that there is an issue related to time, so I would respond in the following way. The holding concept makes sense to me, but would time pressures allow me to work long enough with the service users to build trust and empathy? Here you can see that, as well as engaging in critical thinking, I'm starting to build an argument about some of the challenges of engaging in holding relationships. And Copilot's response is, that's a very real and important concern to them. Time pressures are a structural constraint that can deeply affect the ability to build and sustain the kind of emotionally attuned, trusting relationships described in the holding relationship article. Here you can see that it's clearly drawing on the research from the article when it states that Ferguson et al. 2020 acknowledged this tension, noting that relationship-based practice often requires persistence, emotional labour and time, resources that are frequently limited in contemporary social work settings. Let's explore this further. So the next question asks, given these time constraints, what strategies or micro practices do you think could help you still embody a holding presence, even in brief or fragmented encounters with service users? And it goes on to explain that this might help you identify a lesson that balances ideal practice with real-world limitations. Now here, I can see that it's building on my previous arguments and helping me refine how these might help me to identify lessons that look at balancing ideal practice with real-world limitations. And in response to this question, I would put, I think setting clear boundaries and expectations are important. If, for example, I was going to be late seeing the family, I would phone ahead to make sure they were aware. This small act would show that I respect their time as well as my own. And Copilot responds by saying, that's a strong, grounded insight. Small, respectful actions like phoning ahead can indeed serve as powerful relational signals. Then it draws on the research by saying, what Ferguson et al. Might describe as micro acts of care that help build trust and emotional safety, even within constrained systems. And it expands by saying that you're beginning to articulate a lesson here, that consistency, reliability and respectful communication, even in small ways, can embody the holding function and foster trust. Now, think about that. I guess I am, and I can see that it's starting to summarise the lessons I've gained from reading the research papers. It then goes on to say, well, let's build on that with another reflective question. How do you think your own emotional responses, such as frustration, anxiety or even fear, might influence your ability to maintain empathy and professionalism in hostile or conflictual relationships as described in the first article? This question again is drawing on some of my initial responses related to empathy and professionalism, and Copilot explains that in answering this question, it will help me explore a second potential lesson around emotional regulation and self-awareness in relationship-based practice. And in response to this question, I'll write, I need to ensure that I reflect in action as well as on action, so that I am aware of how my emotions are influencing my behaviours. If I can contain these emotions using these tools, I should be able to ensure my approach is professional and understanding. And Copilot responds by saying, "That's a deeply reflective and emotionally intelligent response to Sim." I like that it's encouraging. You're drawing on Sean's concepts of reflection in action and reflection on action, which align beautifully with Ferguson et al.'s emphasis on emotional containment and practitioner self-awareness. Now, in relation to Sean, this is clearly accurate, and again, the response makes reference to the research in the articles, and I really like that. And Copilot goes on to say that this could form a second key lesson, and the lesson it describes is the importance of emotional regulation and reflective practice in sustaining empathy and professionalism, especially in hostile or emotionally charged relationships. It then pushes me on further to say, well, let's move towards identifying your third lesson. Now, this next question to me is interesting because what we're doing is we're moving from the micro practices to the wider structural issues that social workers also have to deal with. And the next question says, in both articles, the authors discuss the relational dynamics of power, authority, and resistance. How do you think your use of authority, whether soft or firm, can either support or undermine relationship-based practice, particularly with involuntary service users? And it goes on to explain that this will help you explore how power can be used relationally rather than coercively. To this, I'd respond in the following way. I would need to ensure that where possible, work with the family is undertaken on the basis of partnership working. As far as possible, I would undertake that approach. But if the safety of one or more members of the family are at risk, or likely to be put at risk, I would have to use firm authority. And Copilot responds by saying, that's a well-balanced and ethically grounded response to Sim. You're recognising the importance of partnership and collaboration, while also acknowledging the non-negotiable duty of care that sometimes requires the use of authority. It goes on to draw on the research by saying that Ferguson et al. 2020 highlight this tension, especially in the context of involuntary service users, where relational work must coexist with statutory responsibilities. And it goes on to say that this could form your third key lesson, and this would be the need to use authority relationally, balancing empathy and partnership with the firm use of power when safety is at stake. Then Copilot starts to demonstrate that I have three emerging lessons, and these are: 1. Micro acts of care and reliability as foundations for trust and emotional safety. 2. Reflective emotional regulation to maintain empathy and professionalism in challenging relationships. And 3. Relational use of authority to balance partnership with protection. It then asks, would you like help now with drafting your assessment response? Or would you prefer to explore or refine these lessons further through more Socratic questioning? In a real-world situation, I would definitely engage in more Socratic questioning because I'd want more than just the 3 lessons that it's produced. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to ask it to please help me draft an assessment response that would fit into a 5-minute video presentation. Now, rather than starting with a blank page, I would allow students to use Copilot to create a draft assessment response. I would then expect them to use this draft as the beginning point of constructing their own original presentation. As part of the assessment process, I would expect them to email me this draft when they submit their presentation, so that I can see how they have built on the initial draft version. I would make it clear in the assessment briefing that I don't expect the students to be reading word for word the outputs generated by Copilot. Now, what do you think? I mean, should this step be allowed? I would be interested in hearing your thoughts and whether it actually would work for you. So please do let me know by leaving a comment in the comments box below. So in summary, I hope you can see that this approach doesn't just help students complete the task, it also helps them to think and engage in Socratic dialogue that develops reflection, critical thinking, and building reasoned arguments based on the reading they've undertaken around the research. And Copilot can become a Socratic partner by asking questions that deepen understanding and hopefully challenge their assumptions and build the students' confidence. So whether you teach social work, history, science or art, using this approach, Copilot can help you or your students engage in meaningful, reflective learning. Try it out and do share your experiences using the comments box below. Well, that's it folks. If you found this video helpful, please do give it a like, share it with a colleague, and don't forget to subscribe for more practical insights on using GenAI creatively. You can access my other videos about AI and education by clicking this link here. Let's keep learning and adapting together. Please do leave a comment. I will be interested to hear your thoughts about the issues explored. Until next time, bye.